Thanks for watching the Carolina Justice Report. I'm Rainey Romero with the lovely law firm. Stay tuned. Today we're talking all about the Gabby Petito case and how her family just filed a lawsuit against the Moab, Utah police. Welcome back. I am joined with attorneys Amy Lawrence and Sharday Crawford. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing good.
Hi, good. So today there's a lot to unpack here because we haven't done a Carolina Justice Report just yet on Gabby Petito. So we have to give a little bit of background on her story. But then recently in the news, we just found out that her family just filed a lawsuit against the Moab Police Department in Utah. So first, let's give a little background on who Gabby is. So who's Gabby? Kind of what's a little bit of her story? Sharday, I'll start with you.
Gabby is a 20-year-old, I think she was like 22 years old, female who had been traveling across the country with her boyfriend. And at some point she went missing. Mm-hmm. She was found eventually in Wyoming, deceased, and the cause of death was manual strangulation. The boyfriend was later found in Florida, right, where he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Mm. So it was determined that Gabby has actually been a victim of domestic violence, and that there was an issue where in Utah, the fact that she was a victim was completely missed.
Yeah.
Due to the negligence of the Utah Police Department.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of us remember this story. So, I mean, we just hit the 1-year anniversary in June of this happening. And so it's just interesting kind of that it's been a year already for all of this. But first we found out that she was missing, right? So we kind of went on this journey with the poor families that she was missing. And so there was this hunt to find her. And then all these reports came out that her fiance, Brian Laundrie, could have been abusive. And then she was found dead. Then there was this manhunt for the boyfriend, fiance, Brian. And then, he was then later found dead as well. And there was, talks of his parents helping him flee and just a whole big mess. But I think, what is constantly said over and over is how Gabby was very much the victim in this, as far as being a victim of domestic violence and domestic abuse. And to your point, that a lot of that was very easily seen. And police, I think, even commented on the fact that she was showing signs of being a victim of domestic abuse. And so I think the family is kind of saying you should have caught this. Is that kind of how this works lawsuit wise?
Yes, essentially they're filing an action against the Utah Police Department saying that they missed signs. So apparently when witnesses originally made a call to the police, they stated that they saw her fiance slap her. Police stopped the vehicle. It was swerving in the lanes, right, had run over the curb. And when they spoke with Gabby, she did admit that there was a domestic violence type of issue that had happened. But in typical victim reaction, right, she stated that it was her fault, that she started the incident, and that he then slapped her in response to it. Mm. And so when police concluded the report, their conclusion was that it was a disorderly conduct issue, right, and not a domestic violence. And because of that, it didn't get the treatment that it should have received.
What are the rules with that? Like, what makes something disorderly conduct first?
Well, I mean, this was clearly domestic violence.
Right.
When the police arrived on scene, we've got a witness saying that they saw her be slapped. And, in these cases, and we see them all too often, and they break our hearts. Mm-hmm. We see women who are, not trying to buck the system and trying to be polite and not wanting to pay the heavier price if he goes to jail. And so it's these classic signs of, it was my fault, I hit him first, which are usually not the case. There's no wound on him. In the Gabby case, on the body cams, you see she had a scratch, bruising, all the classic signs of domestic violence. And we always have these people, in the what is the saying, like in in the box in the back, right? They always want to make these comments like, well, why didn't she speak up? If she was a victim, why didn't she speak up? But that's the psychology of it, right? Of domestic violence. This is a circle of violence, and this is why we have it. I mean, and this is what police officers are supposed to be trained in, to acknowledge and to spot and, you know, to do things. And Arizona had specific rules that you had to follow. So when you come up on a case like this, that you have to escalate it to this, and these are the things, and there has to be an analysis. And none of that was done. And I think, and we talked about this before, that, and we deal with this all the time, and particularly when I represent victims of domestic violence, you know, the police officer, instead of what we see is we see women who constantly just want the charge to be dismissed, right? Because they don't want to go home and get their ass beat, for lack of a better word. That there will be a price that is paid for doing this.
Or oftentimes too, you've been dating someone, you end up having children with each other, and so there's a relationship. And so when the government, when the state steps in and is attempting to prosecute it, they're stepping into this family structure. They're stepping into these relationships. And so a lot of times that is going to put a drain on it. And so as victims, they'll be like, it's far easier for me to just let this go because that's going to resolve custody. You know, it's easier for me to let it go because then we can figure out how we're going to do vacations, how Christmas is going to work.
Where I'm going to lay my head tonight.
Exactly. You know, if I have a place to lay my head, that I don't have to go to a shelter, that I have the breadwinner that's still going to be able to pay the bills. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of the victims end up requesting, even if charges are pressed, for the state to let it go and not prosecute it.
And so so what happens is we have these police officers, they get in their mind, well, they're just going to dismiss it anyway. And so they don't do that analysis, and they don't do that process, and they don't document it the way they're supposed to. And then we end up with women like Gabby who are dead. And there's got to be some kind of responsibility there.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's awesome that in Arizona you can sue the cops for, you know, not doing their job correctly, because in South Carolina, Utah.
That's okay.
Sorry, in Utah, it's Arizona. But in South Carolina, you don't have that luxury. So, you know, we have those kind of cases all the time where, we have a case here in South Carolina recently where a woman it was a domestic violence situation. She'd gotten away from him. He threatened to kill her. She was scared. Her family comes down, and her parents come down to stay with her, and he breaks in and kills the dad and shoots her. She's on a ventilator. And the police knew all these things and didn't do anything to stop it. And there's no civil remedy for that. I think it's just insane.
That is crazy.
Because this is what we know. This is what we know. If that case alone would be the thing that was the catapult to change things, then it would have already been changed, because we hear that story over and over and over. And you know, I had a federal judge once tell me, you know, Amy, I wanted to negotiate. If we're gonna, you know, negotiate and settle this case, then part of the deal is they have to change their policies. And she said, honey, they're not going to change. If they were, they'd already changed them.
When life gets ugly, justice is love.